The morning sun filtered through the transparent dome of Sentinel-7, casting long shadows across the training grounds. Lieutenant Murphy stood at the edge of the obstacle course, her in hand, as she watched the mixed group of cadets struggle through the morning drills. Her brown hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her uniform bore the marks of someone who had earned every stripe through hard work rather than politics. "Keep your formations tight," she called out to the group. "I don't care what planet you're from. In space, loose formations get people killed." The cadets responded with varying degrees of enthusiasm. The three humans in the group moved with determination, even if their smaller frames made some obstacles harder. The tall and graceful herbivores with pale blue skin moved with natural elegance. The two thornback cadets, covered in natural armor plates, powered through obstacles with brute strength. And standing apart from the others was a single cadet, whose presence made everyone else give him extra space. Had been at the Galactic Military Academy for 8 months now. She had served in the Human Defense Forces for 6 years before Earth joined the wider galactic community. When the opportunity came to teach at the most prestigious military academy in known space, she jumped at it. Not everyone had been happy about humans joining the staff. Many species still saw humanity as the newcomers, the soft from a planet without natural defenses. "Lieutenant Murphy," Danny Brooks jogged up to her, breathing hard. The young cadet was one of hers, fresh from Earth and still adjusting to life among aliens. "Question about the next section." "Go ahead," said, her eyes still on the course. "The wall climb. Should we use the standard grip or the modified version for lower gravity species?" "Standard," replied. "You need to build real strength, not compensate for the station's artificial gravity." Danny nodded and jogged back to the course, smiled slightly. The kid was nervous but eager. She appreciated that, better than the overconfident ones who thought being human made them special. A commotion near the academy's main building caught her attention. Was approaching the training grounds, and he was not alone. Walking beside the massive warrior was a much smaller figure, barely reaching his knee. Recognized the child from briefings. Today was family visitation day, and many instructors had brought their young ones to see the academy. They were one of the galaxy's apex predator species. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, with powerful limbs that ended in retractable claws. Their faces were angular and sharp, with forward-facing eyes that marked them as hunters. Thick fur covered their bodies, and their teeth were designed for tearing meat. They were respected, feared, and generally avoided by most other species. Offspring was a miniature version of the, covered in soft fur with oversized paws it had not yet grown into. Even at this young age, the kit had claws and teeth that could do serious damage. Watched as other species gave the pair a wide berth. The cadets actually moved to the far side of the training ground. Even the armored thornbacks kept their distance. "Is that a child?" Lisa Grant asked, appearing at side. The cadet was breathing hard from the run, but her eyes were sharp and curious. "Looks like it," said Skit. "He mentioned his family was visiting today." "Everyone's terrified," Lisa observed. "Look at them." She was right. The normal flow of the training ground had changed. Cadets found reasons to be elsewhere. Instructors guided their groups away from the pair. Even the other visiting families kept their distance. The kit looked around with wide eyes, its tail drooping slightly. "The kid just wants to explore," said quietly, "but everyone treats it like a bomb." Was speaking with Commander Helen Price near the main building. The massive gestured with one clawed hand while the human commander nodded. The kit sat obediently at its father's feet, but its head kept turning, watching the activity around the training grounds. Returned her attention to her cadets. They had moved on to the next section of the course, a series of balance beams set at different heights. She was about to call out a correction when movement in her peripheral vision caught her eye. The kit had wandered away from its father, was still deep in conversation with Commander Price, unaware that his offspring had started exploring. The kit moved with the awkward grace of youth, its large paws making soft sounds on the metal deck. It was heading directly toward the training ground. Lieutenant," Danny had noticed too. "I see it," said calmly. "Keep working, it's just curious." "Just curious," Danny's voice climbed an octave. "That thing has claws the size of my fingers." "So do house cats," replied. "And you survived those growing up, didn't you?" The kid approached the obstacle course, its nose twitching as it took in new sense. Several cadets had stopped their exercises entirely, frozen in place. Could see the fear in their body language, The had actually backed up against the far wall. Even the human cadets looked nervous, though they stood their ground. Set down her and walked toward the kit. She moved slowly, but without fear, her posture relaxed. The kit noticed her approach and sat down, tilting its head to one side. Up close, could see it was very young, probably not more than a few cycles old. Its eyes held the bright curiosity of any child. "Hey there, little one," said softly. She did not reach out to touch it. That would be presumptuous and possibly dangerous. But she crouched down to be closer to its level, reducing the perceived threat. The kit chirped, a surprisingly high sound from a predator species. Its tail swished back and forth, sweeping across the deck. Had read the basic information on body language. A swishing tail indicated interest or excitement, not aggression. "You're a long way from your dad," continued. Behind her, she could hear the other cadets whispering urgently. Someone had probably gone to alert. That was fine. She was not doing anything wrong, just keeping an eye on a lost child. The kit stood up and took a step closer. Remained still, letting it approach on its own terms. This close, she could see the kit was well groomed and cared for. Its claws were clean, its fur brushed. This was a loved child, not a wild animal. "Lieutenant, maybe you should move back," Lisa called out, her voice tight with concern. "It's all right," replied, not taking her eyes off the kit. "Just stay calm, everyone." The kit sniffed at her uniform, its nose making little huffing sounds. Then it looked up at her face and made another chirp. Smiled despite herself. Removed the claws and fangs, and the behavior was remarkably similar to a puppy exploring new things. "You're supposed to stay with your father," said gently. "He's probably worried about you." The kit sat down again, this time right in front of her. Its tail continued to swish. Then it opened its mouth, revealing rows of sharp teeth, and made a soft, growling sound. The noise echoed across the suddenly silent training ground. Heard someone gasp. Footsteps started moving quickly away. Even her own cadets had tensed up, ready to run, but had heard that kind of growl before, not from animals back on Earth. The pitch was wrong for a threat. The body language did not match aggression. The kit's ears were forward and alert, not pinned back. Its claws were retracted, not extended. This was not a warning. This was an invitation. Took a breath, then she growled back. The sound came from deep in her chest, not quite as impressive as a natural rumble, but close enough. The kit's eyes went wide, and its mouth fell open in what looked like surprise. Then the kit bounced, all four paws leaving the ground at once. It landed and bounced again, making excited chirping sounds. Its whole body wiggled with joy. Could not help it. She laughed. The sound was genuine and warm, and it seemed to delight the kit even more. The small began running in circles around her, making playful growling sounds and occasionally pouncing at her boots. "What is she doing?" someone whispered urgently. "I think they're playing," Lisa answered, her voice filled with wonder. Heavy footsteps announced arrival. The ran toward them, his face showing alarm. Commander Price was right behind him, along with two security officers. They all skidded to a stop when they saw the scene. Was now sitting on the ground, and the kit was attempting to climb into her lap, its tail wagging furiously. She was gently wrestling with it, letting it grab at her hands with its paws while being careful of its claws. The kit was making happy chirping sounds mixed with little growls. Stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. His massive frame blocked out the sun, casting a shadow over and his offspring. For a long moment, no one spoke. The entire training ground had gone completely silent. Finally said, his deep voice rumbling, "Come here." The kit looked up at its father but did not move from slap. Instead, it chirped again and nuzzled against her arm. Looked up at and gave him an apologetic smile. "Sorry, sir. I hope you don't mind. Your kit was curious about the training ground." Continued to stare. His eyes moved from to his child and back again. "You were playing with my offspring," he said slowly, as if testing the words. "Yes, sir," replied. "Was that inappropriate? I apologize if I overstepped." "No one plays with young," said, his voice carrying across the training ground. "Outside our own species, no one is willing to approach them." Looked down at the kit in her lap. "That seems lonely," she said simply. This expression changed, becoming something could not quite read. He knelt down, bringing his massive frame closer to her level. "You were not afraid," he observed. "Your child was playing," replied. "I grew up with dogs and cats. I know what play looks like even across species." Commander Price stepped forward, her face showing concern mixed with curiosity. "Lieutenant Murphy, are you injured in any way?" "No, ma'am," said. "We were just playing. Kidda here has been very gentle." The kit chirped happily at hearing its name and pawed its uniform again, reached out slowly and lifted his offspring from slap. The kit protested with a soft whine but did not struggle. As stood and brushed off her uniform, she noticed the crowd that had gathered. Cadets and instructors from multiple species stood at a distance, all staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to confusion to something that might have been awe. Danny Brooks stepped forward first. "Lieutenant, that was either the bravest or the craziest thing I've ever seen." Smiled, "Sometimes they're the same thing, Cadet." Held his kit close, but his eyes remained on. "I would speak with you later, Lieutenant Murphy, about what happened here today." "Of course," replied formally. As the pair walked away, Kidda looked back over its father's shoulder at. The kit chirped once more and waved a small paw. Waved back, and around her she heard muttered conversations starting up again. Lisa appeared at her side. "Ma'am, you do realize you just played with one of the most dangerous predator species in the known galaxy, right?" Looked at her cadet and shrugged. "Dangerous? Maybe, but that kit wasn't being dangerous. The afternoon training session had attracted an unusual number of observers. Word had spread quickly about the incident with the kit, and now cadets from other training groups kept finding excuses to be near a section of the grounds. She tried to ignore the attention and focus on her lesson. "Equipment maintenance is not optional," explained, holding up a standard issue. "In combat or emergency situations, your gear is what keeps you alive. Every species here uses similar basic tools despite our physical differences." Her human cadets sat in the front row, with Danny and Lisa taking notes on there. Behind them, a mixed group of other species maintained a respectful distance. The cadets sat furthest back, their tall frames hunched as if trying to appear smaller. Demonstrated the proper way to clean and calibrate the various functions. It was basic stuff, the kind of lesson that usually made cadets drowsy on a warm afternoon. But today, everyone seemed unusually alert, their attention divided between her instruction and the surrounding area. She knew why, had remained on the training grounds after retrieving his kit earlier. The Massive stood near the main building, speaking with other instructors. Kidda sat at his feet, occasionally looking toward the training area where taught. "The calibration sensor is located here," continued, pointing to a small panel on the tool. "If this gets damaged or dirty, the entire device becomes unreliable." A soft sound made her pause. It was subtle, barely audible over the ambient noise of the training ground. But instincts, honed by years of military service, caught it. She glanced to her left without moving her head, using peripheral vision to scan the area. There, a small shape was moving through the scattered equipment containers near the edge of her teaching space. Kidda had wandered away from its father again, and this time it was clearly stalking something. The kit's body was low to the ground, its oversized paws placed carefully with each step. Its eyes were locked on. She continued her demonstration, but her awareness shifted. The kit was hunting, or rather, practicing the hunting behaviors it would need as an adult. This was play too, but a different kind. The kind that taught predator young how to catch prey. "Lieutenant," Danny whispered urgently. He had noticed the kit too. Gave a tiny shake of her head. "Keep quiet, don't startle it." She moved to a different equipment case, turning her back on the kit's position. In her peripheral vision, she saw it freeze, then continue its stalk. Good, it was committed to the game now. The other cadets had started to notice. Whispers ran through the group like wind through grass. Heard someone's breathing quicken with fear. A cadet named Al made a small sound of distress and started to stand, probably to run. "Stay seated, Cadet Al," said firmly but calmly. "There is no danger here." "But Lieutenant," Al's voice shook, "the young it is hunting." "It is playing," corrected. She set down on the equipment case and straightened up, still presenting her back to the kit. "Everyone remain calm and stay where you are." Kidda was closer now, maybe 5 meters away. Could hear its breathing, quick and excited. Any moment now. She could feel the tension in the air, the way every cadet was preparing to bolt. Fear was contagious, especially when it came to predators. The kit bunched its muscles and leaped. It was not a full hunting pounce. The kit was too young for that level of coordination, but it was an impressive jump for its size, covering the distance between them in one bound. It landed less than a meter from, its paws hitting the metal deck with a solid thump. Then it growled. The sound was louder than the small growl from earlier. This one came from the kit's chest, resonating with the natural predator timbre that made prey species freeze in instinctive terror. It was the sound that triggered ancient survival instincts across the galaxy. Chaos erupted. Cadets scrambled backward, several falling over each other in their panic. Al did run, heading for the nearest building at full speed. Two Thornback cadets reached for their sidearms, though they did not draw. Even Danny and Lisa had jumped to their feet, backing away quickly. Heard boot steps running from multiple directions. Security responding to the commotion. Instructors shouting. Deep voice roaring his offspring's name. And in the middle of it all, turned around to face the kit. She dropped into a crouch, bringing herself down to the kit's level. Her legs bent, her weight balanced. She locked eyes with Kidda, whose expression showed pure delight at the successful stalk. The kit's tail was high and swishing, its ears forward, its whole body language screaming playful pride. Took a deep breath, drawing air from her diaphragm. Then she roared back. The sound came from deep within her chest, powered by years of learning to project her voice across training grounds and battlefields. It was not as deep as a roar, not as naturally threatening. But it was loud, fierce, and completely unexpected. The roar echoed off the academy buildings, carrying across the entire training complex. Kid A's eyes went huge. Its mouth fell open and its ears swiveled forward, completely focused on. For a heartbeat, the kit stood frozen. Then its whole body seemed to explode with joy. The kit bounced, all four paws leaving the ground. It landed and immediately pounced toward, but not in attack. In play. It batted at her with its paws, claws carefully retracted. Laughed and gently pushed back, engaging in the kind of rough play that young mammals across the galaxy instinctively understood. The kit rolled onto its back, exposing its belly in a show of trust that would have seemed impossible moments before. Placed her hand on the soft fur of its stomach, rubbing gently. Kidda kicked its back legs in the air, making happy chirping sounds mixed with little growls. Tag said with a grin, "You're it." She stood and jogged a few steps away. The kit scrambled to its feet and chased after her, its movements clumsy but enthusiastic. Ran in a wide circle, slow enough that the kit could keep up but fast enough to make it work. The kit was making continuous happy noises, completely absorbed in the game. Heavy boots pounded up to them. Security officers arrived first, hands on weapons. Commander Price was right behind them, her face showing alarm, and ran toward his offspring with a speed that made the ground shake. They all stopped short when they saw and the kit playing a careful game of chase. Was now crouched behind an equipment case while the kit tried to circle around to pounce on her again. Both of them were making playful growling sounds. "Stand down," Commander Price ordered the security team, though her voice was uncertain. "Everyone stand down." Moved forward slowly, his massive frame tense. He called, "Come to me now." The kit looked at its father, then back at. It chirped questioningly. "Go on," said gently, gesturing toward. "Your dad is calling you." Kidda bounced over to its father, still full of energy. Scooped up his offspring with one large hand, holding the kit against his chest. His eyes never left. "Lieutenant Murphy," Commander Price said, her voice strained. "Please explain what just happened here." Stood and dusted off her uniform. Around them, cadets were slowly emerging from their hiding spots or returning from their panicked retreats. The human cadets looked shocked but curious. The other species looked terrified and confused in equal measure. "Kidda was practicing stalking behavior," explained calmly. "It successfully stalked and pounced on me. I responded appropriately to the play behavior." "Appropriately?" One of the security officers looked at her like she had lost her mind. "You roared at a predator cub." "It roared at me first," pointed out. "In play, the proper response to a play challenge is to accept the challenge and engage." Was staring at her with an expression she still could not fully read. "You understand play signals," he said slowly. "Some of them," admitted. "The basics are similar to predator species on Earth. The tail position, the ear orientation, the type of vocalization. Your kit was not being aggressive, it was being playful." "How could you possibly know that?" Commander Price asked. "You're not a—" "I grew up with dogs," said simply. "I've worked with military dogs, police dogs, guard dogs. I've spent time around cats, wolves, even bears. You learn to read body language. You learn the difference between a threat display and an invitation to play. Earth animals, said his deep voice thoughtful. You compare my offspring to Earth animals. Worried she had insulted him, but his tone was not angry. I mean no disrespect. I only mean that certain behaviors seem universal among predator species. The play stalk, the pounce, the playful growl. They are teaching behaviors, ways for young predators to learn skills they'll need later. Looked down at his kit, who was trying to climb up to his shoulder. No one outside there has ever understood this, he said quietly. They see the claws, the teeth, the growl. They see only danger. They see what they expect to see, replied. But behavior tells you more than appearance. Commander Price stepped forward, her expression troubled. Be that as it may, Lieutenant, this situation could have been dangerous. What if you had read the signals wrong? Then Kidda would have hurt me, said honestly. But I was confident in my assessment, and look at the result. She gestured to the kit, who was now perched on shoulder, looking around with bright, curious eyes. Danny Brooks had edged closer during the conversation. Lieutenant, when you roared back, I thought my heart was going to stop, but the kit loved it. Because that's the response it was looking for, explained. Young need socialization, they need play, but if everyone runs away or treats them like monsters, how do they learn? Lisa joined them, her analytical mind clearly working. So when we react with fear, we reinforce their isolation. But when someone responds appropriately to their play signals, we validate them as social beings. Exactly, said. Al, the cadet who had run away, slowly approached the group. The tall alien's skin had paled even further, showing extreme distress. I am ashamed, Al said quietly. I ran in fear, but you stood your ground and played. You ran on instinct, said kindly. There's no shame in that. Fear of predators kept your species alive, but we can learn to override instinct with understanding. Kidda chirped from its perch on shoulder and waved a paw at Al. The flinched but held their ground. My offspring likes you, told Al. Despite your fear, young ones sense intentions more than actions. More cadets had gathered now, forming a loose circle around the group. Could see them whispering among themselves, glancing between her and the kit. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Curiosity, wonder. Commander Price pulled out her. I need to file a report on this incident. Multiple sensors logged the commotion. The security alert went out across half the station. Will there be consequences? Asked. I don't know yet, the commander admitted. What you did was unprecedented, reckless some will say, but also... She paused, looking at Kidda, who was now grooming its paws contentedly on its father's shoulder. Also remarkable. Shifted his weight, drawing everyone's attention. I request permission to speak freely, Commander. Granted. My offspring has been to this academy 4 times now, said his voice carrying weight. Each time every being gives us distance. Children of other species are moved away when we approach. Play areas empty when I enters them. My kit believes all other species fear it, and it has learned to accept this loneliness. The pain in his voice was evident. Several cadets looked uncomfortable. Even Commander Price's expression softened. Today, for the first time, someone played with my child, continued. Someone saw past the claws and fangs to the young one beneath. Someone gave her what all children need. Joy, connection, the feeling of being accepted. Kidda chirped softly and nuzzled its father's neck. I owe you a debt, Lieutenant Murphy, said, his eyes meeting. You gave my offspring something I could not. You gave it a friend. Felt her throat tighten with emotion. I just played with a kid, that's all. No, said firmly. You did far more than that. You saw my child as a person, not a threat. You built a bridge where others saw only a chasm. Commander Price was quiet for a long moment. Then she put away her. I'm going to recommend a full review of interaction protocols, she said. This incident has shown we may have blind spots in how we handle predator species, particularly their young. Lieutenant Murphy, I'll need you to provide detailed documentation of your assessment process. Yes, ma'am, replied. As the crowd began to disperse, Danny and Lisa stayed close to their instructor. You know everyone's going to be talking about this for weeks, Danny said. Probably, agreed. You're either going to be famous or in serious trouble, Lisa added. The hearing chamber was more crowded than it expected. She stood at attention in her dress uniform, hands clasped behind her back, facing a panel of Academy officials and Galactic representatives. Commander Price sat at the center of the long table, with various species representatives flanking her on both sides. News of the incident had spread far beyond Sentinel-7. Within hours, footage from the training ground security cameras had made its way through official channels and somehow leaked to public networks. Roar and the subsequent play session with Kit had been viewed millions of times across dozens of worlds. Reactions were mixed. Human networks called her brave and praised her instincts. Most alien networks expressed shock and concern. Some called her reckless. A few called her dangerous. And now she stood before this panel to explain herself. Ambassador, a senior diplomat, was the first to speak. His tall frame was rigid with disapproval, his pale blue skin darker than usual with agitation. "Lieutenant Murphy," he began, his voice carrying the formal tone of official condemnation. "Your actions endangered not only yourself but every cadet present. You engaged in aggressive physical contact with a predator juvenile without proper safety protocols. This was reckless in the extreme." "With respect, Ambassador," replied calmly. "I did not engage in aggressive contact. I engaged in play. There is a significant difference." "A difference you determined in mere seconds," countered. "What if your assessment had been wrong? What if the juvenile had been displaying genuine aggression?" "Then I would have responded differently," said, "but the behavioral signs were clear. The Kit's body language indicated playful intent, not hostile intent." Another panel member, a crystalline named Instructor as, leaned forward. "You claim expertise in reading behavior, yet you have no formal training in xenobiology or predator species psychology. On what basis do you make such confident assessments?" "Observation and experience," answered. "I grew up working with Earth's predator species, dogs primarily, but also cats and other carnivores. While the specifics differ, many play behaviors are universal among social predators." "Earth animals," said with barely concealed disdain. "You compare one of the galaxy's most dangerous species to domestic pets." Before could respond, the chamber doors opened. Entered his massive frame, drawing every eye. He was not alone. Kidda walked beside him, staying close to its father's leg. The Kit looked around the chamber with wide, curious eyes. Commander Price stood. "This is an official hearing. Civilians are not permitted." "I requested permission to attend," said, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. "As the parent of the individual involved, I have relevant testimony." The panel members exchanged glances. Finally, Commander Price nodded. "Permission granted. Please take the witness position." Moved to stand beside, Kidda followed, then surprised everyone by sitting down between and its father. The Kit looked up at and chirped softly. Without thinking, reached down and gently stroked the Kit's head. Several panel members made sounds of alarm. "You see," gestured at the interaction. "She continues this dangerous behavior even now in formal proceedings." "Dangerous?" His voice carried an edge. "Ambassador, I will explain behavior since you seem unfamiliar with it. When my offspring approached Lieutenant Murphy during her training session, it was engaging in play-stalk behavior. This is how young learn hunting skills, yes, but it is also how we learn social bonding." "Hunting and bonding are not compatible concepts," another panel member said nervously. "For they are inseparable," explained. "We teach our young to hunt, but we also teach them to control their predator instincts. Play fighting with trusted individuals helps them learn boundaries. It teaches them when to use their strength and when to hold back." He placed one large hand on Kit A's head. "When it growled and pounced at Lieutenant Murphy, it was issuing a play challenge. The proper response among would be to growl back and engage in careful wrestling. This is fundamental to our social development." "But Lieutenant Murphy is not," protested. "She had no right to engage in species-specific behavior." "She had every right as a sentient being recognizing another sentient being's communication," countered, his voice hardening. "My offspring reached out in friendship, and Lieutenant Murphy responded in kind. Should she have ignored this gesture? Should she have treated my child as a threat when it clearly meant no harm?" Commander Price held up a hand. "Please help us understand. You said this was a play challenge. How could Lieutenant Murphy have known this?" "Because the behavioral cues are clear to anyone who understands predator social structures," replied. He gestured to Kidda. "Observe my offspring now. The tail is relaxed and moving slowly. The ears are forward. The posture is open and calm. This is a young one at ease, feeling safe." The Kit chirped and leaned against Sleg. She continued to stroke its head gently. Now imagine, continued, if it were actually aggressive. The tail would be rigid or lashing violently. The ears would be pinned back. The body would be tense and coiled. The growl would be continuous and deep, not the higher-pitched play growl used with Lieutenant Murphy. These are subtle distinctions, as observed. To untrained eyes, perhaps, agreed. But Lieutenant Murphy saw them immediately. She assessed the situation and responded appropriately within seconds. This is not recklessness. This is exceptional situational awareness. Remained quiet, letting the speak. She could see the panel members considering his words, though still looked unconvinced. "I have a question for Lieutenant Murphy," said another panel member, a human officer named Captain Roger Grant. "What would you have done if the kid had shown aggressive signs instead of playful ones?" Thought carefully before answering. "I would have stood my ground but remained non-threatening, backed away slowly while maintaining eye contact, made myself appear larger but not aggressive, created distance while calling for. The key is to not trigger a chase response by running, but also not to challenge by advancing." "You have this planned out," Grant observed. "I always assess potential threats and responses, sir," replied. "It's part of military training, but I also assess potential opportunities for positive interaction. Kidda presented an opportunity, not a threat." Danny Brooks and Lisa Grant had been permitted to attend as witnesses. Now Commander Price called them forward. "Cadet Brooks, you were present during the incident. Describe what you observed." Danny stepped up, clearly nervous but determined. "Ma'am, I saw Lieutenant Murphy remain calm when the kid approached. She continued teaching, but I could tell she was tracking its movement. When the kid pounced and growled, everyone panicked. But Lieutenant Murphy did not. She assessed the situation and responded." "You ran," pointed out. "You perceived danger." "Yes, sir," Danny admitted. "I reacted on instinct, but Lieutenant Murphy reacted on training and experience. That's the difference between a cadet and an instructor." Lisa was called next. "Cadet Grant, you have been studying xenobiology as an elective. What is your assessment of Lieutenant Murphy's actions?" Lisa stood tall. "Ma'am, I reviewed the security footage and compared it with available literature on behavior. Lieutenant Murphy's interpretation was correct. Kidda displayed classic play challenge behaviors. The response of engaging in play was not only appropriate but optimal for building positive relations." "You believe this was beneficial?" Commander Price asked. "Absolutely, ma'am," Lisa said firmly. "Consider the alternative. If Lieutenant Murphy had treated Kidda as a threat called security, had the kit restrained, what message would that send? That young are dangerous by nature, that they should be feared and isolated. Instead, Lieutenant Murphy sent a different message. That young are children who deserve understanding and engagement." Made a dismissive sound, sentimental reasoning. "No, Ambassador," Lisa continued respectfully but firmly. "Strategic reasoning. They are one of the most powerful military species in the galaxy. How they view other species, how they learn to interact with us, begins in childhood. Lieutenant Murphy may have done more for galactic relations in 5 minutes than a year of diplomatic meetings." Murmurs ran through the chamber, felt a surge of pride in her cadet. Lisa had nailed the broader implications. Spoke again. "May I share something personal with this assembly?" Commander Price nodded. "I have brought it to Academy functions 4 times, said, his voice heavy. "Each time I watch other parents move their children away from us. I see the fear in their eyes. I hear them warn their young ones to stay back. I has learned to expect this. My child believes it is a monster in the eyes of other species." His hand rested on the kit's head. Kidda looked up at its father, then around the chamber, as if understanding the gravity of the conversation. "Yesterday, for the first time, someone looked at my child and saw not a monster, but a young one seeking connection," continued. "Lieutenant Murphy gave us something I cannot provide, acceptance from another species, the knowledge that not everyone fears us." "That is certainly valuable," Commander Price said gently, "but we must also consider safety protocols." "I understand safety concerns," replied. "I am a parent. I worry about my offspring constantly. But I ask you to consider this, which is more dangerous: a child who learns that other species respond to its play with fear and rejection, or a child who learns that other species can be trusted friends." The silence that followed was profound. "A who grows up isolated becomes a who sees other species as prey or enemies," said quietly. A who grows up socialized becomes a who sees other species as colleagues and allies. Lieutenant Murphy is teaching my child the second path. Captain Grant leaned forward. Are you suggesting that Lieutenant Murphy's actions, while unconventional, serve a broader purpose? I am saying more than that, replied. I am saying that her actions should become the model, not just tolerated but encouraged and taught. You want other species to interact with young, sounded horrified. I want my child to have friends, said simply. I wanted to play with other children. I want my offspring to learn that claws and teeth do not define us. We are more than predators, we are people. Kidda chose that moment to chirp loudly. The kit stood up and walked over to the panel table. Several members leaned back nervously, but the kit simply placed its small paws on the edge of the table and looked up at them with bright, curious eyes. You see, said, my child wants connection, seeks it naturally, but fear prevents it. Commander Price looked at Kidda for a long moment. Slowly, carefully, she reached down and placed her hand near the kit's paw. Kidda sniffed her hand, then chirped happily and nuzzled against her palm. I see your point, Price said quietly. She looked at. Lieutenant Murphy, I need to ask you directly. Do you believe you took unnecessary risks? Consider the question. No, ma'am. I believe I took calculated risks based on accurate assessment. Could I have been wrong? Yes, but the evidence strongly supported my interpretation, and the potential benefit of responding positively outweighed the minimal actual danger. Minimal danger from a predator juvenile, muttered. With respect, Ambassador, said, turning to face him. Kidda is about as dangerous as a human toddler with scissors. Yes, the kit has claws and teeth, but it lacks the size, strength, and killing intent of an adult. It is a child. Children can be hurt or can cause accidents, but they are not weapons. Unless provoked, countered. I did not provoke it, said firmly. I engaged with it. There is a difference. Moved to collect his offspring. As he scooped up Kidda, the kit looked back at Commander Price and chirped goodbye. Price smiled slightly and waved. I will make my recommendation to this panel, said formally. Lieutenant Murphy should not be punished. She should be commended, and her methods should be studied and taught. The galaxy needs more people who can bridge the gap between predator and prey species. That is your recommendation, said. Others may disagree. Then they disagree with progress, replied. He nodded to. Thank you, Lieutenant, for seeing my child, truly seeing. Nodded back, her throat tight with emotion. As left with Kidda, Commander Price addressed the panel. We will adjourn for deliberation. Lieutenant Murphy, you are dismissed for now. We will contact you with our decision. Saluted and left the chamber. Outside, Danny and Lisa were waiting. That was intense, Danny said. You think they'll rule in your favor? Lisa asked. Looked back at the chamber doors. I think they'll do what they believe is right, and honestly, that's all we can ask for. But in her heart, she hoped they would see what saw. Not just the risk, but the opportunity. The chance to change how species saw each other. The possibility of building bridges instead of walls. The galaxy needed more understanding, more connection, more willingness to look past surface differences and see the person beneath. Kidda had taught her that lesson clearly. She hoped the panel would learn it too. 3 days after the hearing, Commander Price summoned to her office. The decision had been made. Entered to find not just the commander, but waiting as well. She stood at attention, keeping her face neutral despite her racing heart. At ease, Lieutenant, Price said, gesturing to a chair. Please sit. Sat, nodding that remained standing near the window. His massive form blocked much of the afternoon light. The panel has reached its decision, Price began. After extensive deliberation and review of all testimony and evidence, we find that your actions, while unconventional, were both appropriate and beneficial. Relief flooded through, but she maintained her composure. However, Price continued, we also recognize that your unique skills in reading predator behavior represent an untapped resource. Therefore, we are implementing a new program, and we would like you to lead it. Ma'am asked. Turned from the window. I requested that the Academy develop understanding courses specifically focused on predator-prey relations. The panel agreed. We want you to teach other cadets and instructors how to properly assess and respond to predator species behavior, Price explained. Not just, but all species that are typically feared or avoided. Thornbacks, razor clan, even the aquatic species. Felt the weight of the responsibility. That's a significant undertaking, ma'am. Which is why you will not be doing it alone, Price said. Has volunteered to co-teach the program, and his offspring has volunteered to serve as a demonstration partner. A volunteered could not help but smile. Enthusiastically, rumbled, and caught what might have been amusement in his tone. My offspring wishes to help others understand behavior and to make friends in the process. We will start with small groups, Price outlined. Voluntary attendance at first until we can demonstrate the program's value. You will develop curriculum, training materials, and safety protocols. We'll provide cultural context and species-specific information. When do we begin? Asked. Tomorrow, Price said. We already have a list of interested cadets, surprisingly long, actually. The first session was held in an outdoor training area, deliberately chosen for its open space and multiple exit routes. Wanted anyone who felt uncomfortable to know they could leave easily. No one should feel trapped. 20 cadets attended, a mix of species. The 3 human cadets from regular unit were there, Danny, Lisa, and a newer addition named who had been fascinated by the security footage. There were also 2, including Al, who had run during the original incident. 3 Thornbacks attended, their armored frames making them appear more confident than their body language suggested. The rest were various species was still learning to identify. Kidda sat beside its father at the front of the group, tail swishing with barely contained excitement. Thank you all for coming, began. This is an experimental program. We are going to learn together how to better understand and interact with predator species. Some of what we discuss may challenge your instincts. That is normal and expected. Stepped forward. I will start with basic communication, he said. Many species see us and feel immediate fear. This is natural. We evolved as apex predators, but fear is not the only possible response, and often it is not the correct response. He gestured to Kidda. My offspring will demonstrate various behaviors. Lieutenant Murphy and her human cadets will show you how to interpret these behaviors and respond appropriately. The kit stood and stretched, showing off its small but sharp claws. Several cadets tensed visibly. First demonstration, said. Aggressive posture versus playful posture. Kidda dropped into a crouch. Its ears pinned back against its head. Its tail went rigid and straight. A low, continuous growl emanated from its chest. The sound was distinctly different from the playful growl had heard before, deeper, more threatening, sustained. This is aggression, explained. Note the pinned ears, rigid tail, continuous growl. The body is tense and coiled. If you see this, you are in danger. Back away slowly, do not run, do not make sudden movements. The kit's posture changed. Ears came forward, tail began to swish, body relaxed. It made a shorter, higher-pitched growl and bounced slightly. This is play, continued. Same species, same basic action, completely different meaning. The ears, tail, and vocalization all change. This is what showed Lieutenant Murphy. How do you tell the difference in the moment? Asked one of the Thornback cadets, a female named Cora. Stepped forward. Practice and observation, but there are key indicators, with specifically watch the ears first. Forward means alert and potentially friendly. Back means defensive or aggressive. The tail is second. Movement usually indicates excitement or play. Rigidity indicates threat. Vocalization is third, short. Varied sounds are usually social. Long, continuous growls are warnings. Danny raised his hand. Can we practice identifying these? That is exactly what we are going to do, confirmed. For the next hour, Kidda demonstrated various behaviors while cadets called out what they observed. At first, everyone was hesitant, their voices uncertain. But as the kit repeated behaviors and cadets began to see the patterns, confidence grew. Al, who had fled before, was particularly attentive. I see it now, the tall alien said quietly. When the kid approached before, I only saw the claws and teeth. I did not observe the ears or tail. I missed the actual communication. That is a critical realization, said approvingly. You cannot read communication if you only see threat. Can we try interaction? Lisa asked. Controlled interaction, I mean, not just observation. And exchanged glances. That was going to be our next phase, said, but only volunteers and we will start very simply. Stepped forward first. I'd like to try. Coached him through the approach. Move slowly. Let Kidda see you coming. Crouch down to reduce your perceived size. Extend your hand but do not reach toward the kit. Let it come to you. Followed the instructions carefully. His hand trembled slightly but he held steady. Kiddo approached, sniffed his hand, then chirped and rubbed against his palm. "Oh, breath, oh wow, it is so soft." The kit made a small sound and climbed into his lap, froze, unsure what to do. "Relax," instructed. "You can pet it gently, think of it like a large cat." Carefully stroked the kit's head. Kiddo began making a rumbling sound, not a growl, but something closer to a purr. His face split into a huge grin. "This is incredible," he said. One by one, other cadets volunteered to interact with Kiddo. Each approach was supervised carefully, with and ready to intervene if needed. But the kit responded beautifully to each cadet, seeming to understand that these were nervous individuals taking brave steps. When Al's turn came, this entire body shook with fear. But the cadet approached anyway, determination overriding instinct. "I ran before," Al said quietly to the kit. "I am sorry, I judged you by fear instead of observation." Kiddo tilted its head, then chirped softly and placed one small paw on Al's extended hand. The eyes widened, and a tear ran down the alien's pale blue face. "You are just a child," Al whispered, "just a child who wanted to play." The breakthrough moment came later in the session when a Thornback cadet named Razor brought his own offspring to the session. The young Thornback was smaller than Kiddo, covered in developing armor plates that would eventually harden into the species' characteristic protective shell. "My daughter has been asking about the kit," Razor explained. "She saw the footage and wanted to meet I told her I would ask if it was safe." "Another predator species, young one," observed. "This will be interesting." Knelt beside the young Thornback. "Hi there, what is your name?" The child said in a small voice, "Is the scary?" "Sometimes new friends seem scary at first," said gently. "But Kiddo is very nice. Would you like to meet?" Nodded, pressing close to her father's leg. Kiddo approached slowly, reading the situation with surprising sensitivity for one so young. The kit chirped softly and sat down a short distance away, giving space. "Look at its tail," pointed out. "See how it is moving slowly. That means it is being careful and gentle." Watched the tail movement. Then, with the boldness of children everywhere, she stepped away from her father and approached the kit. Both young ones stared at each other. Then giggled, Kiddo bounced. And just like that, they were playing, two predator species children engaging in the universal language of youth. The watching cadets went completely silent. Several were recording the moment, glanced at and saw something she had not seen before in the massive warrior's face, moisture gathering in his eyes. "First time," he said quietly, "in A's entire life playing with a non-child." "First recorded instance in the Academy's history," Lisa added, checking her. "Two predator species young playing together outside controlled laboratory conditions." As the session continued, something remarkable happened. More cadets lost their fear, not just of Kiddo specifically, but of the concept of predator species in general. They began asking questions not about danger, but about culture, social behavior, family structures. A pattern emerged that found fascinating. Once cadets overcame their initial fear of, they became curious about other predator species. One of the Thornback cadets, Cora, approached directly. "I must apologize," Cora said, her armored head bowed. "I have avoided you in the hallways, changed my route to not encounter you. I realize now this was disrespectful." "You acted on instinct," replied. "There is no shame in that." "But there is shame in not questioning my instinct," Cora countered. "You are an instructor, you deserve respect, and your offspring deserves friendship. I failed to provide either." "You are here now," said. "That is what matters." By the end of the first session, all 20 cadets had successfully interacted with Kiddo. More importantly, they had learned to read behavioral cues and respond appropriately. Assigned homework, observing predator species around the academy and documenting their behaviors. As the cadets dispersed, Instructor Eth approached. The aliens' multiple eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep thought in their species. "Lieutenant Murphy," Eth said, their voice buzzing slightly. "I observed your session. I find it fascinating that humans can bridge what we consider an unbridgeable gap." "What gap is that, Instructor?" asked. "Between predator and prey mindsets," Eth explained. "My species evolved as prey. We have instinctive responses to predator species that are nearly impossible to override. Yet humans, also omnivorous with prey characteristics, can somehow see past this divide. Maybe because we have been both," suggested. Humans were prey once long ago, but we also became hunters. We understand both perspectives. A valuable trait, Eth observed, perhaps essential for true galactic unity. The sessions continued 3 times a week. Attendance grew rapidly. Within a month, they had to move to a larger training area to accommodate demand. Other predator species cadets began attending, and some brought their own families. Proved to have a natural talent for reading body language across species. He could distinguish subtle behavioral cues that even sometimes missed. Danny overcame his initial nervousness entirely and became one of the best demonstrators. Lisa documented everything meticulously, creating comprehensive guides for each predator species they studied. Kit thrived in the program. The Kit went from isolated and lonely to the center of a growing community of friends. Young Thornback attended every session, and the two became inseparable playmates. But the most rewarding moment came 6 weeks into the program. Al, the who had initially run in fear, stood before the assembled group with Kit sitting calmly in their lap. "I spent my whole life afraid of predators," Al said, voice steady. "My species has been prey for millions of years. Fear is in our genes, but this program taught me that genes are not destiny. I can learn. I can grow. I can overcome instinct with understanding." Al gently stroked Kit A's head. "This small one taught me that appearance is not nature. Claws do not make a monster. Teeth do not make an enemy. What makes us friends or foes is choice. And today I choose friendship." Kit chirped and nuzzled against Al's chest. Around the training area, cadets from multiple species applauded. Even the other predator species in attendance made sounds of approval. Cat's eye, the nodded once, a gesture of profound respect. They were not just teaching behavioral recognition. They were changing how species saw each other. One interaction at a time, they were building bridges across chasms that had existed for. And it had all started with one simple choice: to see a child instead of a threat, to respond with understanding instead of fear, to roar back with joy instead of running in terror. 6 months after that first playful encounter, Sentinel-7 had transformed. The changes were visible everywhere looked as she walked through the academy grounds on a crisp morning. A group of mixed-species cadets sat together in the common area, including 2 and 3 engaged in animated conversation. A Thornback child played with a young Razor-Clan pup near the fountain, their parents watching calmly instead of with the tension that would have been normal before. And at the center of it all, Kit had grown into a confident adolescent, no longer the uncertain Kit who had once been avoided by everyone. The young had become something of a celebrity, not for being feared, but for being loved. Headed toward the main auditorium where today's demonstration would take place. Admiral had arrived yesterday for his official inspection of the socialization program. If his report was favorable, the program would be expanded to all galactic military facilities throughout known space. If not, it might remain a small experiment on Sentinel-7. "Nervous?" Commander Price asked, falling into step beside. "Honestly, yes," admitted. "This program has changed lives here. I want to see it help others, too." "You have changed more than lives," Price said quietly. "You have changed how we think about each other. That is no small thing." They entered the auditorium to find it already packed. Every seat was filled, and cadets lined the walls. Recognized faces from her original sessions, now serving as volunteers and assistant instructors, stood near the demonstration area, helping set up equipment. Lisa Grant was at a console, ready to display behavioral data. Danny Brooks coordinated with other human cadets who had become skilled at communication. Stood at the front with Kitta, who had grown significantly but still maintained that playful energy. Admiral sat in the front row, his weathered face unreadable as he observed the preparations. "Lieutenant Murphy," the Admiral said as approached, "I have read extensive reports on your program, impressive documentation, but reports only tell part of a story. I want to see the reality." "Of course, sir," replied. "We have prepared a comprehensive demonstration." The program began with explaining the theoretical foundation. "Fear is natural," she told the assembled crowd. "Every species evolved with survival instincts, but intelligence gives us the ability to look beyond instinct, to observe, analyze, and choose our responses rather than being controlled by ancient programming." Took over. "Predator species have long been isolated in galactic society. We are respected for our military capabilities, but we are rarely welcomed in social contexts. Our children grow up knowing they are feared. This creates barriers that persist into adulthood. Kida demonstrated various behaviors, the same ones that had been taught in every session. But now the demonstration was smoother, more practiced. The kit moved through aggressive postures, defensive positions, and playful invitations with the skill of a trained performer. "Who can identify this behavior?" asked the audience. Dozens of hands shot up. She called on a young cadet from one of the newer training groups. "Play invitation, ma'am," the cadet said confidently. "Forward ears, swishing tail, short vocalizations. The kit wants to engage in social bonding through play." "Correct," confirmed. 6 months ago, this same behavior would have emptied this room in panic. Today, we understand what we are seeing. The demonstration continued with live interactions. Cadets from multiple species volunteered to approach and engage with Kit. Each interaction was smooth and confident. The volunteers showed no fear, only respect and appropriate caution. Then came the moment had been planning. She signaled to the side entrance and Razor entered with his daughter. The young Thornback had grown too, her armor plates hardening into their adult form. Behind them came 3 other families, a family with 2 young kits, a Razor Clan pair with their pup, and surprisingly a couple with their adolescent offspring. "These families represent the real success of this program," explained to Admiral. "They are here voluntarily because their children have formed genuine friendships across species lines." The young ones were released to the demonstration area. What followed was remarkable. Kida immediately engaged in a play wrestling match that looked rough but was carefully controlled. The 2 young kits joined in, creating a tumbling pile of predator young that would have caused panic 6 months ago. The Razor Clan pup circled the group, yipping encouragement. And the adolescent, a prey species by evolution, sat nearby and laughed at their antics. "This is not staged," said to the Admiral. "This is their normal interaction. They meet 3 times a week to play together. Their parents supervise but rarely need to intervene." Admiral leaned forward, his eyes tracking the playing children. "The child shows no fear response." "Because the child learned young that observation is more reliable than instinct," explained. "All these children have been raised with the understanding that species is not destiny, that we can choose to be friends despite our evolutionary differences." A staged scenario came next, a situation designed to show the practical applications of the training. A cadet played the role of someone encountering an unfamiliar predator species for the first time. Other cadets walked through the assessment process. Observe body language, identify behavioral cues, determine threat level, respond appropriately. The scenario involved a mock-aggressive encounter. The predator-playing cadet displayed all the warning signs of genuine threat. The responding cadets correctly identified the danger, maintained safe distance, and called for assistance rather than trying to engage. "Critical thinking," Lisa narrated from her console. "The training does not eliminate caution, it enhances judgment. These cadets can now distinguish between a child at play and an adult preparing to attack. That distinction saves lives." Then the scenario shifted. The same predator-playing cadets switched to playful behavior. The responding cadets recognized the change immediately and adjusted their approach, engaging appropriately instead of maintaining defensive positions. "Adaptability," added. "The ability to read changing situations in real time. That skill is valuable in combat, in diplomacy, in every aspect of military and civilian life." Admiral watched everything with intense focus. Could not read his expression, but she noticed he took extensive notes on his. The final portion of the demonstration featured Al. The cadet who had once run in terror now stood confidently before the audience with Kit at their side. "I represent the potential for change," Al said, voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. 6 months ago, I could not be in the same room with her. My fear was so intense that I would physically flee. Today, Kida is my friend. We study together. We train together. I have been to the family quarters for meals." Al gestured to the playing children. "My younger sibling is there, playing with predator species young. This would have been unthinkable in our culture. But Lieutenant Murphy taught us that fear is not wisdom, that true wisdom comes from understanding." The pause, then looked directly at Admiral. "Sir, I am studying to become a diplomatic officer. I want to serve in mixed species environments. Before this program, that dream was impossible. I could not function around predator species. Now I can not only function, I can build genuine relationships. This program did not just teach me about behavior. It taught me about my own potential to grow beyond my limitations. The audience applauded. Even Admiral nodded approvingly. Commander Price took the stage. The program's success extends beyond individual development. We have documented significant improvements in mixed species team performance. Units that have completed the training show better communication, higher trust levels, and more effective cooperation under stress. Data scrolled across the display screens. Mission success rates, team cohesion scores, incident reports. All showed measurable improvement in groups that had participated in the training. We have also seen unexpected benefits, Price continued. Predator species cadets report feeling more accepted and integrated. They are more willing to socialize outside their species groups, more likely to form diverse friendships. This reduces the isolation that historically has been a problem for predator species in mixed environments. Stepped forward one final time. I speak now as both an instructor and a parent, he said, his deep voice resonating through the auditorium. 6 months ago, my offspring was lonely, isolated, believed that being meant being alone except among our own kind. Today, my child has friends from 6 different species, plays, studies, and trains alongside beings who were taught to fear us. He placed a massive hand on Kit A's shoulder. This program has given my offspring something I could never provide, the knowledge that we can be more than predators, that we can be friends, colleagues, and valued members of a diverse community. For this gift, I am eternally grateful to Lieutenant Murphy and the humans who saw past appearances to the people beneath. Kit chirped and waved at the audience, eliciting warm laughter and scattered applause. Admiral stood, the room went silent. Lieutenant Murphy, approach, he commanded. Walked forward, standing at attention before the Admiral. I came here skeptical, said bluntly. I read reports of a human officer playing with a juvenile and thought it was either exaggerated or foolhardy. I expected to find a small feel-good program with limited practical application. He paused, looking around the auditorium at the assembled faces. I was wrong. What you have built here is revolutionary. You have not just taught behavioral recognition. You have fundamentally changed how species interact. You have created a model for true integration that goes beyond tolerance to genuine acceptance. Turn back to, I am authorizing immediate expansion of this program to all military academies in the fleet. Furthermore, I am recommending that modified versions be implemented in civilian sectors. Schools, diplomatic facilities, mixed species colonies, everywhere that different species must coexist. Relief and joy flooded through, but she maintained her composure. Thank you, sir. I am also promoting you to commander, continued. Your new assignment is to oversee program implementation across the fleet. You will develop training materials, certify instructors, and ensure quality control. This program must maintain its integrity as it scales. I accept the assignment, sir, said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. One more thing, added, he looked at. I am offering you a position as Chief Cultural Advisor for the program. Your expertise and perspective are essential. Will you accept? Stood taller. I accept with honor, Admiral. Nodded. Then we have work to do. This is only the beginning. The auditorium erupted in applause. Cadets cheered, instructors congratulated each other, and even the usually stoic Thornback cadets made rumbling sounds of approval. Kit bounded over to and leaped up, placing paws on her chest. The now adolescent was too large for her to hold easily, but hugged the enthusiastic youngster anyway. We did it, she whispered to the Kit. We changed things. Kit chirped happily and licked her face with an oversized tongue, making laugh. In the weeks that followed, life became a whirlwind of activity. She traveled to 3 different academies to begin program implementation. She trained dozens of new instructors, both human and alien. She worked to develop comprehensive curriculum materials for over 30 predator species. Danny, Lisa, and all received commendations and offers to join the program full-time. All 3 accepted, becoming the core of an expanding team of communication specialists. But the most meaningful moment came 3 months later when returned to Sentinel-7 for a brief visit. She walked onto the training grounds where it had all started and found the area transformed. Where once there had been separated species groups, now there were integrated teams. Predator and prey species trained side by side. Children of different species played together without supervision. And in the center of it all, a new group of young kits were learning play behaviors, surrounded by eager cadets from multiple species who wanted to interact with them. No fear, no panic, just curiosity and friendship. Al was teaching the session, this tall frame moving confidently among the predator young. Remember, forward ears mean the kit is engaged and interested. Watch for the tail movement to indicate mood. Watched from a distance, not wanting to interrupt. But Kita spotted her and came bounding over, now nearly adult-sized but still playful. The adolescent nearly knocked her over with enthusiastic greeting. Hey, laughed, scratching behind the kit's ears. Look at you, all grown up and still wanting to play. Kita made a rumbling purr and leaned against her. Other young approached, curious about the human who was clearly special to their friend, greeted each one, nodding how confident they seemed. These kits had never known isolation. They had grown up accepted and integrated. That is your legacy, a deep voice said, had approached quietly. These young ones will never experience what I felt before meeting you. They will grow into adults who understand cooperation and friendship across species lines. It is our legacy, corrected. I just started the conversation, you taught the language. We started something bigger than either of us, agreed. Look around, this is not Sentinel-7 anymore, this is the future. Looked at the integrated training grounds, at the playing children, at the confident instructors teaching understanding instead of fear. She thought about the dozens of other academies now implementing similar programs, the thousands of cadets learning to see past appearance to character. The future looks good, she said quietly. Kita chirped in agreement, tail swishing happily. Across the galaxy, in academies and training facilities, on mixed species stations and integrated colonies, the change was spreading. Species that had avoided each other were learning to communicate. Predator young who would have grown up isolated were making diverse friends. Prey species who had lived in constant fear were discovering courage through understanding. And it had all started with one simple choice 6 months ago, when a human officer saw a lonely child instead of a dangerous predator, when she chose to respond with a roar of joy instead of running in fear, when she smiled and played instead of calling for help. One moment, one interaction, one bridge built across an ancient divide. Sometimes the smallest actions create the biggest changes. Sometimes a single playful growl, answered with understanding and friendship, can change the galaxy. Murphy had learned that lesson well. And now, thanks to her courage and wisdom and Kit A's trusting heart, thousands of others were learning it too. The future was not about erasing differences or eliminating diversity. It was about understanding that beneath the surface variations of species, beneath the claws and teeth and armor plates, beneath the evolutionary history and instinctive responses, there existed something universal. The desire for connection, the need for friendship, the capacity for love. Those things transcended species. Those things built real unity. And those things, more than any weapon or technology or political alliance, would determine the galaxy's future. As the sun set over Sentinel-7, casting long shadows across the training grounds where predator and prey played together without fear, felt certain they were building something that would last. Not just a program or a protocol, but a fundamental shift in how species saw each other. From fear to understanding, from isolation to integration, from ancient enemies to future friends. All because one kit had growled at a human in play, and she had smiled and roared back. As the session ended and cadets dispersed, many stopping to play with Kita before leaving, felt a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. This was bigger than military training. This was changing the galaxy itself. One playful growl at a time. Looked at Kita still perched happily on its father's shoulder. The kit caught her eye and chirped, waving its paw again, waved back. Worth it either way, she said. As being a kid, there's a difference. As the training ground slowly returned to normal activity, picked up her. But she could not shake the image of the kit's drooping tail when everyone had avoided it earlier. No child should have to feel that isolated, no matter how sharp their claws were. She had a feeling this day was far from over.